Welcome to a Star Wars show. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out another episode. If you are a repeat listener, if you're new to either the YouTube channel or you found the podcast, be sure to subscribe on YouTube or follow on whatever podcast platform you happen to be enjoying the show on. And as always, leave a comment up on YouTube. We have some listener emails this week, and you can email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. So on this week's episode, I'll get you caught up on the latest news. There's a new writer, another writer, for Daisy Ridley's Rey Skywalker post The Rise of Skywalker film. Also, everything that we know so far, courtesy of Screen Rant, about Shawn Levy's film, or is it Levy? I think it's Levy. Shawn Levy's film. And then we'll get to your emails this week on the show. Nothing earth-shattering, but some interesting news items nonetheless.
This is not going to go the way you think.
All right, so the first article that we have says, in a surprising turn of events, and I don't know what qualifies as surprising at this point in time, we have another major news item relating to in-development Star Wars movies. Just days ago, The Hollywood Reporter, and we talked about this on last week's episode, revealed that Ryan Gosling might join Shawn Levy's upcoming Star Wars film. Now, they are saying that writer and director George Nolfi will write Daisy Ridley's forthcoming new Jedi Order film. Now, Nolfi's filmmaking background has consisted largely of work in the action and thriller genres. He has penned, among others, Ocean's 12, The Bourne Ultimatum. However, he has dipped his toe into a period drama, as well as the 2020 movie The Banker. As The Hollywood Reporter notes, he's just the latest in a series of scribes to work on this particular movie, which again is set after the events of and years after The Rise of Skywalker. Oscar Award winner Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy is still on board to direct the film, which is tentatively titled A New Jedi Order. Now, she's been attached to that film since the summer of 2022, having gone through 2 full rotations of writers and at least 1 creative overhaul following the exit of Damon Lindelof and Justin Britt Gibson back in early 2023. For now, the trade is saying that the story will still take place some 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker and potentially see Rey rebuilding the Jedi Order. However, given the many bumps along the road, it's possible some of the story may have been changed. And I'll continue to beat this drum. They need to make this part of the saga film. This needs to be episode 10. When it comes to Shawn Levy's film, it looks as if this is going to be another standalone movie, different part of the galaxy, not connected to the main storylines. But the franchise is still built upon what started as the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy that came after it. And for better or worse, I happen to very much enjoy those films for various reasons, the sequel trilogy. And that, to me, is where the franchise needs to continue to go. Now, if it's set 15 years after the events, 20 years after the events of The Rise of Skywalker, that's fine. But I think attaching the episode 10 to it, even though they didn't focus on the episode titles for the sequel trilogy, is the right marketing move. But I am just a talk show host. I don't work for a movie studio, so what do I know? I do know that I don't expect that we're going to get anything official for the time being until after Star Wars Celebration in Japan, I believe, which is coming up very soon. And it will more than likely be focused on the big Star Wars item this year, and one of the only ones, and that would be Andor Season 2, and it being the last season, because it will end right as we go into Rogue One. I do expect, though, and I hope that they actually have solid information to share, that we will get an update on the slate of movies that they have been working on, even though, as we've talked about and reported on the show, it's always in flux. Always in motion is the future.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
So Screen Rant put together everything that we know about Shawn Levy's Star Wars film. And this, of course, is the director of Deadpool and Wolverine, a movie which I thought was just okay. It seemed like more like a lot of just action sequences stitched together for a film. I certainly do not place it anywhere within the quality of the movies that all came before and ended with Avengers Endgame. Everything that's come after that has been completely lackluster. And I've watched Deadpool and Wolverine twice now. And again, it's entertaining doing that thing with my fingers. But, in terms of depth and it making a lot of sense, there's a lot of just silly action sequences that don't really contribute to the plot. However, it made a ton of money. Shawn Levy has made some good films. I believe he did Free Guy, a film that I enjoyed. Adam Project on Netflix I enjoyed quite a bit as well. So, Screen Rant went into detail of everything that we know so far about his potential Star Wars movie, which seems to be on the fast track, as I reported last week on the show with the announcement that Ryan Gosling was being looked at to play one of the lead character, if not the lead character in the film. Plot-wise, we do know very little. However, the director clarified his desire to explore more of the Star Wars timeline without being reliant on or beholden to the well-chronicled events of the Skywalker saga. Levy also hinted that his Star Wars movie would be a standalone story, as I mentioned, one that doesn't have to serve another movie. On the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, Shawn Levy said, "I'll say that the experience of crafting this story has forced me to think about that question. Because there's only so many times that Star Wars movies can revisit the same section of a timeline, and so it's really forced me, because I don't want to do a Star Wars movie that is redundant to the others, nor am I interested in doing one that has to serve another movie." Now, I know a long time ago, George Lucas had talked about the future of the Star Wars franchise and related it to what they did with the Bond movies, having different directors come in and tell these stories over and over again. And we're in this place when it comes to Star Wars storytelling that it doesn't leave a lot of room for a complete and total, rethinking, as I talked about extensively in last week's episode, rethinking of the franchise. But to Shawn Levy's point, the reason why I bring it up is that, for the most part, the Bond movies are somewhat formulaic, especially the original Bond movies. The more recent ones, the modern-era Bond movies, not so much. But the original series of Bond movies with both Sean Connery and Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, and Pierce Brosnan, they all followed, a very similar trope and storytelling. And so I disagree a little bit with Levy. We can go back and tell these stories again and do them in unique and different ways while still remaining true to sort of the essence and the elements that make a movie Star Wars. Listen, and I'm a person that didn't have a hard time with the more derivative aspects of The Force Awakens. And I don't think that we need to have, a mega planet-killing machine in every film. But I do think we need those galactic stakes, especially when we're telling a larger story over trilogies. I think we need to have that major villain and the hero that has to overcome him. And, those are the elements of the original trilogy that worked so well. So I understand what he's saying. I agree to a point, but I also don't like this idea of getting too far away from those tropes that make up a Star Wars film and what we've come to expect, especially when we're looking at, the next movie coming out so many years after the rise of Skywalker. On January 21st of 2025, The Hollywood Reporter broke the story that Hollywood A-lister Ryan Gosling was in talks to star in the movie. Pretty major departure for Star Wars, as we've talked about, which has historically opted to cast fresh talent rather than utilizing a major star's appeal to draw in audiences. Right now, there's no word on who Gosling might potentially play, and we don't even know if it's an already established Star Wars character or somebody entirely new. My guess is it's probably somebody entirely new. Now, he goes on to say, but the possibilities are endless. With all the news floating around, it's no surprise that there's been talk of Shawn Levy's Star Wars filming later this year. In December of 2024, Hollywood insider Jeff Snyder reported that Levy was planning to start shooting in September of this year, which would be a significant jump from the film's previous holding pattern. Given all of the cinematic trouble Lucasfilm has faced over the past few years, the future of Shawn Levy's Star Wars movie looks unusually excitingly bright. More recently, The Hollywood Reporter said that if Ryan Gosling is officially cast in the film, Shawn Levy's project would jump the queue and be the next theatrical Star Wars movie to start production, following the completion of the principal photography for The Mandalorian and Grogu. This would corroborate Snyder's initial report and put it on track to become the second movie in Star Wars' upcoming theatrical slate. So, and again, this, The Mandalorian and Grogu is going to be such an interesting experiment. Because without knowing what the film is about, going off of what we know that this film was potentially going to be a Mandalorian Season 4, and under the direction of Bob Iger, they decided to fast-track it and turn it into a film, which is the same thing they did with Moana. Now, Moana made a lot of money at the box office, but most people have mentioned that the movie itself, in and of itself, is substandard. It made money off the kids. Now, maybe The Mandalorian and Grogu, being as popular as they are, will be able to draw a mass audience, and it'll make $1 billion. What's unfortunate, in my opinion, is that because we've sort of accidentally put so much distance on The Rise of Skywalker and not having a theatrical release, it's a bummer to me that the first movie that's coming out is going to be this movie based off of what has only been a streaming show. And I don't necessarily look at that as being something huge and expansive and epic, right? When The Force Awakens was announced and we kind of got an inkling of what the story was, I mean, we were walking into the next trilogy of the franchise. This is a major film. This is episode 7 of the Star Wars saga. With The Mandalorian and Grogu, it kind of has this Solo vibe to it. I mean, even Rogue One, with the promise of it delivering the story pre A New Hope, had that direct attachment to the original trilogy. And so I hope that The Mandalorian and Grogu is successful, because if it's not, then I fear for what future decisions are going to be made in terms of theatrical releases for my beloved Star Wars franchise. As always, what do you think? Leave a comment up on YouTube or drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Hotwire01 writes this: I think people are weary of Hollywood just constantly remaking things over and over. Nothing gives me any confidence that Lucasfilm Disney, since they own the IP, would do any reboots or retcons. Anyway, I like the idea of separate stories with the universe that may even reference some of the ideas of films and shows. The Mandalorian was a great look at another part of the universe, but now it appears that they're jumping the shark just by making a movie about a story that they've already told in the Clone Wars show. I'm disappointed, as I was looking forward to it. Now, they write. Yet with The Mandalorian, they were able to tell another story that still held true to the existing lore. The scene where Luke showed up to save them was epic. If they were to make a Luke movie and cast someone like Sebastian Stan, that could work pretty well, but I wouldn't want a retcon, and I wouldn't want a retcon either. As I mentioned last week, if we're doing spin-off stories and treating Star Wars characters like superhero characters, I think it would have to be established up front that this exists sort of in its own Star Wars universe and isn't attached to the timeline, much like The Batman with Robert Pattinson isn't attached to the Joker film or the other Batman films. I'd want just a new story. Skeleton Crew was definitely better than I expected after the insanely bad Acolyte series. Again, another part of the universe with some soft mentions of the greater story. I would not want to see another version of Han Solo with a different Millennium Falcon, or even an origin story of Chewbacca where he speaks English. If they want to do that, it's best to just completely leave the Star Wars universe, and create a new one. You don't mess with the Falcon. Ha, they write at the end. Well, to your point, I mean, they kind of did see another version of Han Solo. I almost feel like the Solo story should have been completely outside of all the other storytelling. Meaning, do the Solo a Star Wars story. Don't do his origin or background. Don't make it directly connected to the other films. You don't need to do a Kessel Run. Those are from the other movies. Just have Alden Ehrenreich playing Han Solo with your Chewbacca and your Millennium Falcon, and have him going on an adventure all by himself. They attempted to do this, sort of connection to the rest of the series, which I understood at the time, and I'm appreciative that it is that. But in rethinking the franchise, I think they would have been better served as, yes, this is a Solo story, but we're going to intentionally not really attach it to anything else. Because then the expectations are too high. And this may be contrary to things I've said before on the show in the past, but I'm really just trying to think moving forward what Star Wars should do to sort of rekindle the magic that it seems has been missing for a while, despite some of the success and the good quality streaming shows like we've received, and what I think, what I like of Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew. But in Solo, a Star Wars story, throwing in Darth Maul at the end and the comment about going and seeing a gangster that ties it all into the timeline. Yes, it's fun. And when you watch the movies, you can kind of wedge Solo, a Star Wars story into your chronological order of watching, and it fits in. But I'd love to see another Solo movie, but do as I just mentioned. It's Chewbacca, it's Han Solo. Pick a time frame, but have them off on an adventure somewhere. That doesn't have to be tied to anything that we've seen before. Friend of the show, Star Wars Santa, and check out his YouTube channel, Star Wars Santa. I heard someone say that maybe we should look at Star Wars stories more like mythology. Tales in mythology don't always line up with each other. The basic universe is consistent, whether Greek, Roman, or even Egyptian. The core characters show up with the same attributes, but the stories don't have to rigidly line up with each other within that mythology. No, it's another great comment, Star Wars Santa, and I agree with you. I don't see that they're ever going to do that. The only way that I see something happening along those lines, or again, what I mentioned last week on the episode rethinking the Star Wars franchise, would be if Disney were to sell off Lucasfilm to another entity and they decided to start all over again, which would be really interesting to see at this point in time. The good news is for Star Wars fans, we've got a lot of really great content. So it's like, as a fan, I'm not necessarily bothered that we're not getting a lot of new Star Wars, because we've received a lot of Star Wars, and I've got plenty of choices of Star Wars to choose from. I have more Star Wars choices of viewing now than I ever could have possibly conceived, even back when Disney purchased Lucasfilm. All right, let's go, and we'll talk lastly with Edwin, who writes this. I think it's a good idea to treat the Star Wars IP like the Marvel and DC films. I'm a Star Wars fan as much as anyone else, and I could, and I get it could seem sacrilege to break traditions from the past, but whether the fans think of it the way that Disney does, and the way is using Star Wars, it's true that it's not been the same, good or for worse, to whatever opinions fans might have. Might as well do something way different. The saying, you can put the toothpaste, you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. What's done is done. We hear all the time of fan casting of Sebastian Stan, and as a young Luke, or Tom Hiddleston as a young Palpatine. But rebooting and recasting is something they should strongly consider, and not be stuck in a box with traditions, and having to bring back the same actors, CGI actors, only keeps them in a small box. Thanks for the show and your ideas and opinions. God bless Edwin. And God bless you as well, Edwin. Thank you, as always, for the comment. It'd be interesting if the Shawn Levy film ended up being a Luke Skywalker movie, and Ryan Gosling was playing an older Luke Skywalker. You could do something somewhere else in the galaxy pre-Return of the Jedi, or post-Return of the Jedi. I certainly don't think that that's happening. But it's an interesting thought nonetheless. But I want to hear from you. Again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment up on YouTube. And before I let you go, if you're into reading science fiction or listening to science fiction, check out the EMBARK science fiction space opera series, available on Amazon.com. Just search for EMBARK, EMBARK. A stargazer, a headstrong and gifted pilot, a hardened former military officer, and a tech geek, and a ship whisperer. When it comes to motley crews, the Anniversary has most of Starship's beat, but as a ruthless corporate madman bent on tyranny attempts to exploit an apocalyptic industrial accident, it might fall to this ragtag band of unlikely heroes to save Earth's evacuees from annihilation, if they can survive each other first. Do not miss out on this fast-paced and action-packed science fiction adventure. 7 books in all in the series. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with sci-fi. Great for all, written for adults, but great for ages 11 plus. Go to Amazon.com and check out EMBARK Book 1 today. Available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic, filled with some romance, really cool technology, and a lot of unique action sequences, and plenty of it, EMBARK is perfect for you. Amazon.com, search for EMBARK and Jon Justice. Pick up book 1 in the series today. That's you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. God bless. I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.